I need your help, please. He needs milk.
I will help you. Bring him in.
In the unforgiving heart of the Arizona Territory, where the sun scorches the land and old grudges run deeper than the canyons, stories often end in dust and blood. But sometimes, just sometimes, a different tale takes root. One born not of vengeance, but of mercy. This story begins with a woman named Caroline Webb. A settler's widow, she lived alone on the edge of the frontier, where her silence spoke louder than the wind that howled through the desert nights. Her baby died before he ever drew breath, and her husband perished not long after, leaving her with only the weight of what might have been. She thought her heart was beyond healing, until an Apache warrior staggered onto her land, carrying a dying infant and begging, not for food, not for shelter, but for milk. What followed was more than a crossing of paths. It was a test of compassion, a battle between fear and hope, and a quiet forging of something rare on the frontier: family. Some said she was a fool, others, a traitor. But those who saw what she did, they called her something else entirely. They called her mother. Like this story so far, if it's pulling at something in your chest, or if you just love a good Wild West mystery, go ahead and like this video, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss the next chapter. And tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? We love seeing how far these stories ride. Now back to the tale. Arizona Territory, 1877. The heat rolled off the red dirt like breath from a dying beast. Everything was dry. The air, the grass, even the bones of the land cracked under the weight of the sun. The wind carried nothing but dust and silence, the kind that wraps around a person's soul and squeezes until even the strongest forget how to speak. Caroline Webb hadn't said a full sentence to anyone in months. Not since the last stagecoach came through and took the preacher's widow with it. She didn't need to speak. Not anymore. Her days were measured by the creak of the front porch, the scratch of chickens, and the slow drip of water from the cracked pump behind the house. Nights brought ghosts, the kind she'd buried and the kind she hadn't. She still slept on her husband's side of the bed, still folded the worn blue shirt he left hanging on the hook by the door, still lit the lantern at dusk and whispered, "If you're out there, come home." But nobody ever did. That morning had started like every other. She poured a tin cup of goat's milk, tossed a pinch of corn to the hens, and walked the fence line with a rusty rifle in case a coyote decided to try its luck. She was halfway through her rounds when she spotted something, or someone, slumped against the fence post. She froze. It was a man. No, not just a man, an Apache. Her breath caught in her throat. Her rifle lifted instinctively, though she barely had strength to hold it steady. He didn't move. His head was low, chin resting on his chest. His long black hair was matted with sweat and dust. In his arms was a bundle wrapped in a pale animal hide. The bundle moved, twitched, then let out a weak, rasping cry. "A baby." "Don't come any closer," she shouted, though he hadn't moved. "I swear to God, I'll shoot." Still nothing. She edged closer, rifle aimed. Her boots crunched in the dirt like thunder in the silence. Then the man lifted his head. His eyes, dark, sunken, full of desperation, met hers. He didn't speak English well, not at first, but what he did say carved through her like a blade. "Please," his voice cracked, barely a whisper. "He need milk." She stared. The baby whimpered again, barely alive by the sound of it. It was too hot for a child to survive long in this heat without water. His little lips were dry, cracked. A thin film of dust coated its nostrils. She saw the baby twitch again, this time weaker. "He's not mine," the man added. "My sister, she die. I run. No food. No milk." Caroline lowered the gun slightly, but her voice stayed sharp. "Why me? You think I'm just gonna give you milk and wave you off?" He looked down at the child and back at her. His lips trembled. "No wave, no run. Just help." She hated how her legs moved before her mind made a choice. She stepped forward slowly, never letting go of the rifle, and crouched down to see the child closer. A boy maybe a few weeks old at most. His face was red from the sun, but pale underneath, the kind of pale that signaled danger. He was too light, too still. "How long has he been like this?" she asked. The warrior shook his head, confused. "When did he last eat?" she clarified. "No food, 3 days." Her gut clenched. She looked at the man again. His face was sunken, yes, but not from age. From hunger. There was no lie in his eyes. Only a plea. She should have told him to get off her land. That's what any other settler would do. Maybe even shoot him for coming near. Maybe that's what she would have done a year ago. But something happened when that baby made that pitiful cry. Something snapped loose. The memory hit like thunder. Her own baby, silent in her arms after 12 hours of labor. She hadn't even gotten to name him. She stood and said only 2 words. "Bring him." The warrior blinked. "You help." She nodded. "Don't make me repeat myself." He staggered to his feet, barely able to walk, and followed her across the field, past the henhouse and the broken wheelbarrow, toward the porch where her dead husband used to sit and whittle sticks that never turned into anything. Inside, it was cooler. She set down her rifle, grabbed a clean cloth, and dipped it into a bowl of cool well water. She pressed it gently to the baby's forehead, then pulled a jar of goat's milk from the shelf. No bottle, no teat. She tore an old muslin scrap from her sewing pile, soaked it in the milk, and gently pressed it to the baby's lips. He sucked weakly. The man watched, still standing, swaying slightly. "You can sit," she said gruffly. He nodded once and lowered himself to the edge of the table bench. "What's his name?" The man paused. "Maiko," he said softly. "Means chief." She looked down at the baby and smiled, just a little. "Chief, huh? He sure fights like one." "He's strong," the man whispered. "He live." She glanced at him. "Not if you starve. You need food too." He didn't answer, only watched as the baby sucked on the cloth again. Caroline stood, pulled down a tin of beans, and set them on the stove to warm. She poured him a cup of water. "Name?" He looked up. "Taza." "I'm Caroline." He nodded once. "You good woman." She didn't respond, just stirred the beans and tried not to cry. When she finally turned around, she saw something strange. The way Taza was looking at the baby, not just like a guardian or an uncle, but like he'd pinned every last piece of hope he had on that tiny, fragile life. "What happened to his mother?" she asked after a long silence. Taza's jaw tightened. "Soldiers. Cavalry. They come after raid. Think we attack wagon. We know attack. We hunt deer. They come fast. Shoot first." Caroline's stomach twisted. "And his father?" Taza shook his head. "Gone before birth. She died giving him life. So the boy had no one. No tribe, no family left but this half-starved man in front of her. And now her." She looked at Maiko again. He'd stopped crying. His small belly rose and fell with steadier breaths. She didn't say what she was thinking, that he reminded her of the baby she lost. That maybe this was some cruel trick of the Lord, taking one and giving her another, but not in the way she ever expected. She just said, "He'll sleep better in the bedroom. You can take the corner cot." Taza hesitated. "You trust me?" She looked him in the eye. "I don't know, but the baby needs sleep. And I don't think a man who begged for milk is about to slit my throat in the night." He gave a dry, pained laugh. "No, I only slit throat when baby fed. Custom." She stared at him for a second, then snorted. Funny. His face didn't change, but something in his posture relaxed. That night, as the wind howled outside and Maiko slept swaddled in an old quilt by the hearth, Caroline lay in bed with her eyes wide open. She thought of the baby she buried. She thought of the stranger asleep just feet away. And she thought of the way Maiko's tiny fingers had curled around hers like he already knew he belonged. When dawn crept in through the cracked shutters, she rose quietly and crept to the fireplace. Maiko was still there, breathing, alive, and so was she. Something had changed. Something was beginning, but she didn't have words for it yet. All she knew was this: she'd fed a hungry child, and for the first time in 2 years, Her house wasn't filled with silence. It was filled with life. The rooster crowed late, as if even it had hesitated to speak in the presence of something new. Caroline stirred from her bed, the early morning light painting long slivers of gold across the wooden floor. For the briefest second, she forgot. She swung her legs over the edge of the mattress like she always did, reached for the shawl hanging on the post, and squinted toward the window. Then the memory returned. The baby, the Apache, the night that hadn't ended like she expected. She stood quietly and crept out into the main room, her bare feet light against the wood. There, near the fireplace, Taza lay on a threadbare wool blanket, Maiko resting on his chest. Both were still. For a moment, she feared they had died in the night, that the peace in the room was too quiet, too still. But then Maiko stirred, letting out a small grunt. Taza's hand instinctively moved to cradle the back of the boy's head. Caroline exhaled slowly. She turned to the kitchen, filled a kettle with water, and set it on the stove. She didn't know what came next, didn't know what to do with an Apache warrior and a motherless child in her home. But the body moves on muscle memory when the heart is too afraid to speak. She was stirring cornbread batter when Taza appeared behind her, silent as a shadow. "I fix fence," he said. Not asked, said. Like a declaration. She looked over her shoulder. His face was drawn, but the fire in his eyes was clearer now. The desperation had cooled into purpose. "You don't have to," she replied. "I do." He looked past her toward the window. "You feed my blood. I fix your home." She watched him for a long second. "You don't owe me anything." He nodded. "Still, I fix." With that, he stepped outside. She heard the screen door creak, the crunch of his boots on dirt. The baby began to fuss again, tiny cries like the flutter of moth wings. She washed her hands and picked him up gently, resting him against her shoulder. His breath was warm on her neck. It startled her how natural it felt. She fed him more milk-soaked cloth, rocking him with one arm while the kettle hissed behind her. Each time she looked at him, she saw flashes: her baby, the grave under the cottonwood tree, the wooden cross with no name. She swallowed the rising ache and focused on the living. An hour later, Taza returned, his arms scratched, hands stained with pitch. "Top rail fixed," he said. "Coyote hole patched." "You're a quiet worker," she muttered. He didn't smile, but there was pride in his stance. "I'm boiling beans," she added. "If you're hungry." "I eat," he said softly. He stepped inside, glanced at Maiko, then reached into the small pouch at his waist and pulled out a tiny blue bead. He handed it to the baby, who clutched it with surprising strength. Caroline raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "Mother's," he said. "Necklace. To keep him safe." She looked at the bead, a simple thing worn and chipped, and wondered how many miles it had traveled, how many nights it had watched, how many prayers it had heard. Maiko cooed and waved it around like it was gold. Taza turned to her. "You lost child?" The question struck her like a stone to the chest. She didn't answer right away. Her hands tightened on the spoon. "Yes," she said finally. "A son." He bowed his head slightly. "I see him in your eyes." She hated how raw that made her feel. "You don't know what you see." "I know grief," he replied. "We carry same weight." Caroline set the spoon down too hard. "Don't compare your life to mine." "I don't. Just same pain, different shape." The baby cried again, this time louder. Caroline sighed and turned her back to him. "We should eat." They sat across from each other in the soft morning light, the wooden table between them suddenly feeling smaller than it ever had. Caroline watched him break the cornbread into pieces, dipping it slowly into the beans. He chewed with quiet reverence, as though each bite meant something. "I had a husband," she said suddenly, her voice low. "Matthew died fixing the well pump. Rope snapped and he fell, broke his neck." Taza looked up but didn't speak. "I buried him myself, dug until my fingers bled, said the Lord's Prayer with mud in my mouth." She blinked back the burn behind her eyes. Then 2 days later the baby came, too early, too small. Silence. I begged God, she whispered. Begged him to take me too. Taza lowered his eyes. But you stay. I stayed. She looked at Maiko in the cradle. Now I don't know why. He studied her for a long time. Then he said, maybe now you do. The words hung there, like smoke that didn't rise. She didn't answer. Later that day, Taza chopped wood without being asked. Caroline found him shirtless behind the barn, muscles pulling and straining with each swing. The heat didn't seem to touch him. Sweat ran down his back, but he didn't pause. Not once. When he returned, he offered her half the stack without a word. She took it and nodded. That night, the wind blew fierce, rattling the windows and moaning through the eaves. Maiko wouldn't sleep. Caroline walked the floor with him, humming an old hymn her mother used to sing. Taza watched from the chair, his eyes following every sway of her hips, every touch to the boy's cheek. You love him, he said. She didn't look up. He's just a baby. No, not just. You love him like blood. She stopped rocking. And what would you know about love? He stood, stepped closer. I know what it cost. I know it stay even when it break you. Caroline held Maiko tighter. You planning to take him somewhere? Once he's stronger. Taza's jaw clenched. Nowhere to go. She turned then. You mean to stay? I mean to follow where he need. And if I said I wanted him to stay here? Taza looked at her with something unreadable in his eyes. Then I stay too. She didn't respond. The fire crackled between them. The wind howled outside like a wounded dog. Maiko's cries faded into soft breathing. Taza stepped forward and reached to touch the child's hand. He no Apache. He no white. He just baby. He need mother. Caroline's throat tightened. And what does he need from you? Taza met her gaze. All I have left. Days pass like that. Sunrise to sunset, dust and chores, shared meals, silent moments, small words. The three of them moving like pieces of something unfinished. Neighbors started to notice. Old man Rigsby rode past and narrowed his eyes at the figure fixing Caroline's barn roof. A rancher's wife from 2 miles over stopped to drop off eggs and saw the baby in the window. And Caroline could hear the gossip already being loaded into her saddlebag. Don't care what they think, she muttered that night. Taza was sewing a tear in one of Maiko's blankets. They will come. I know. Soldiers too. I know that too. He looked up. Still, you let us stay? Caroline walked to the cradle and leaned down, brushing Maiko's hair gently. I didn't let you stay. You never left. Taza's hands stilled. The needle stopped mid-stitch. Their eyes met again. He didn't smile. Neither did she. But something passed between them then. Something silent and unshakable. That night, she dreamt of fire. Fields burning. Men shouting. Horses screaming. She held Maiko in her arms. And Taza stood before her with a blade in one hand and an outstretched palm in the other. When she woke, the dream clung to her like sweat. Outside, the world was changing. So was she, and she wasn't sure if she should be afraid of that. But as she reached for the child who now slept like he'd always belonged, she knew one thing without question. She would burn the whole desert to protect him. The knock came just before sundown. 3 firm raps on the wooden door. Not frantic, not hesitant. The kind of knock that said whoever stood on the other side wasn't asking for permission. Caroline froze mid-stir as the stew bubbled over the fire. Maiko was asleep in the cradle. Taza had gone to fetch water from the creek. She reached for the rifle leaning against the wall. The knocks came again, louder this time. She crept to the window and lifted the corner of the curtain. A cloud of dust behind a single horse. A man dismounted, tall, wide-shouldered, uniform dusty and faded blue. A cavalry badge glinted on his chest. 2 more riders waited behind him, their rifles sheathed but visible. Her heart plummeted. She pulled the bolt across the door and called out, "What do you want?" The voice that answered sent a chill through her spine. Calm, authoritative. Caroline Webb? Who's asking? Sergeant Wilkes, Arizona Territory Patrol. Got a few questions for you. She hesitated, then lowered the rifle just enough to open the door an inch. About what? The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. About the Apache. Her grip tightened. We had word, he continued, that someone matching the description of a known fugitive was spotted near your land. I haven't seen anyone, she lied, her voice steady. Wilkes tilted his head. That so? Behind him, one of the other soldiers chuckled under his breath. Caroline opened the door just a little more, keeping the barrel of the rifle between them. I live alone. There's no one here but me and my goats. The sergeant's gaze drifted past her, into the dim interior of the house. Mind if we have a look around? I do mind, she said quickly. Unless you have a warrant. Wilkes didn't move, but something in his expression hardened. We don't usually need one out here, ma'am, especially when it comes to hostile tribes. She stood taller. This is my land. You step inside without permission, you'll be trespassing. He met her eyes then. A long moment of quiet tension passed between them. Finally, he gave a thin smile. As you wish, just doing our duty. If you see anything unusual, you let us know. I will. Good day, ma'am. He tipped his hat, turned on his heel, and walked back to his horse. They didn't ride off right away. They lingered, watching, waiting. Caroline didn't close the door until their silhouettes disappeared into the horizon. She didn't breathe for a long time. Maiko stirred in the cradle. She rushed to him, scooped him into her arms, and held him close, whispering, "It's all right, it's all right." But even as she said it, her hands trembled. Taza returned after dark. When she told him, he didn't speak. He just knelt by the fire and stared into the flames. "They'll come back," she said quietly. "I know. You need to leave." He looked up sharply. "You want me go?" "No," she said, voice thick. "But if they catch you, I don't run." His tone was calm but final. "I stay for him." She sat beside him, close enough to feel the heat of his body. "I'm scared." "I know," he said again. "Me too." Neither of them slept that night. The next morning, Caroline buried the rest of the goat's milk in a crate behind the house, beneath a layer of hay. If they came searching, she didn't want anything that looked like it was for a baby out in the open. She made sure the cradle was pushed behind the curtain. She and Taza rehearsed a story. He was a hired hand, nothing more. A drifter who worked for food. They lived like that for a week. Tense, careful, always watching the horizon. Then, one afternoon, she spotted smoke in the distance. Not the thin trail of a cook fire. Column thick, black, angry. She ran to the ridge behind the barn and saw the flames rising from a neighbor's property, old Mrs. Whitlow's place. She was too old to be a threat to anyone. But her land backed up to the western ridge, not far from the old Apache Pass. By evening, the rumors reached them. "Whitlow's place burned to the ground," Taza said, returning from town with his hat pulled low. "No one knows who. Some say Apache. Others say soldiers looking for Apache." Caroline's chest tightened. "Is she alive?" He nodded. "But they watching her now, like hawks." That night, as they sat by the fire, Caroline stared at Taza for a long time. "What is it?" he asked. "I don't know how this ends." He stirred the coals. "Neither do I. But I know I won't give him up." Taza looked at her then. "Even if it mean your life?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." He didn't respond with words. He reached out, took her hand, and pressed it gently to his chest. "You have heart of mountain lion," he whispered. She didn't let go. 2 days later, Wilkes returned. This time, he didn't knock. He rode straight up to the house with 4 soldiers and a wagon behind them. Caroline had just finished washing Maiko's cloths. The baby was inside, napping in a crate lined with old quilts. Taza was out back, hidden behind the woodpile. Wilkes dismounted and marched up to the porch. "Afternoon again, ma'am." She stepped outside, hands at her sides. "Something I can help you with, Sergeant?" "We're doing a sweep. Found fresh tracks near the ridge. Your land's in the line." "My land's dry. Nothing here but fence posts and brush." "We'll see." He waved his hand, and 2 men dismounted. "You touch anything in my house, And I'll scream loud enough to wake the dead, she said. Wilkes smiled. That baby you got might wake him first. She froze. What baby? He stepped closer. A woman saw you in town. Said she heard crying. Said she saw a dark-skinned man carrying something wrapped in buffalo hide. Caroline's heart pounded. She saw wrong. Wilkes tilted his head. Mind if we check? I do. Again. Unless you've got a warrant. I've got men, he snapped. And orders. She took a step back. Wilkes motioned. The two soldiers climbed the porch and pushed open the door. No, Caroline shouted. You can't. But it was too late. One of them stepped inside. Then came silence. A heartbeat. Then, Sergeant, you'll want to see this. Wilkes entered. Caroline stumbled after him. The soldier stood beside the cradle. Empty. No baby. No blankets. Nothing. Wilkes turned slowly. Where is it? I told you there's no baby. His mouth twisted. You hiding something. I'm hiding my patience. He stepped closer, until their faces were inches apart. If I find out you're protecting a savage, then what? She snapped. You'll shoot me? Burn my land like you did Whitlow's? His nostrils flared. You think people don't know? She whispered. You think they can't see what you're doing? He leaned in. You're not safe, Caroline Webb. The frontier doesn't protect fools. Or traitors. She didn't flinch. Then you'd better shoot me now. Wilkes studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to his men. Let's go. There's nothing here. They left in silence. Caroline didn't move until the sound of hooves faded. Then she dropped to her knees. Taza appeared from the root cellar a minute later, Maiko in his arms. Caroline ran to them, her hands trembling. You heard. Yes, he said softly. He sleep through it all. She pressed her forehead to Maiko's and wept quietly. That night, they sat together on the porch as the wind picked up again. The stars overhead blinked through the clouds. Caroline rocked Maiko in her arms. They'll be back, she said. Taza nodded. They'll come harder. I won't run. I won't either. She looked at him. We need a plan. He nodded again. We do. And in the silence that followed, under the weight of coming war, a bond stronger than blood began to form. Not between tribes, not between nations, but between a man with nothing left and a woman who had already lost everything. And the child who would live because neither of them let go. The rain came without warning. It started with a sudden hush in the wind, the kind that makes animals uneasy and makes old people say prayers under their breath. Then the clouds rolled in, black, low, and hungry, spilling over the horizon like they had business to finish. Caroline stood on the porch with Maiko in her arms, watching the first drops stain the dust. Her hair clung to her face, and her dress flapped behind her in the wind. She didn't go inside. She liked the feel of the rain. It reminded her that not all storms brought fire. Some only came to wash. Behind her, Taza worked quickly to pull the last of the laundry from the line. His back was soaked, the shirt clinging to his skin, but he didn't stop. The wind had picked up, scattering clothespins and whipping shirts like ghosts in the trees. A flash of lightning cut across the sky, and for a moment, everything was light and shadow. By the time they got inside, the floor was wet with muddy footprints, and Maiko was fussing in her arms. She rocked him gently as Taza stirred the stew on the fire, adding more corn and a pinch of salt. They ate in silence, save for the patter of rain on the tin roof. Caroline didn't mention the envelope. It had arrived 2 days ago, delivered by a skinny boy on a half-starved mule. No return address, just her name written in bold black letters. She hadn't opened it. Didn't have to. She already knew what it said. Wilkes wasn't finished. She finally cracked the wax seal after Taza and Maiko had gone to sleep. The paper was crisp, official. A summons. She was to appear at the garrison in 2 days' time and explain her refusal to cooperate with ongoing investigations. If she failed to appear, the letter warned, she could be considered a conspirator in harboring fugitives. Caroline sat at the table, the letter in her lap, and stared at the dark beyond the window. She'd expected this. Wilkes was the kind of man who liked control. She'd denied him that. Now he'd used the law to drag it out of her. She considered telling Taza. But what would that change? He already knew danger was close. He saw it in her face every time the horizon darkened. So she did what she always did. She waited. The next morning, the sun came back like it was trying to apologize. Steam lifted from the ground, the air thick and sticky. Taza took Maiko out for air, walking the baby in circles beneath the cottonwood tree. Caroline watched them from the window, her fingers twitching against the edge of the summons. She had until sundown to decide whether she would ride out or make them come for her. She chose neither. Instead, she saddled the old mule, packed a loaf of cornbread, and kissed Maiko's forehead. "If I'm not back by dark," she told Taza, "you know what to do." He didn't ask where she was going. She rode west, away from the garrison, through brush and rock, up through the canyon trail where no soldiers dared to follow. The pass was narrow and steep, but she knew the way. At the top, where the wind howled through the stones, she waited. They came just before noon. For men, not soldiers, tribesmen. Apache, one of them, older, scarred, and silent, recognized her from a memory neither of them spoke aloud. He dismounted and stood before her, waiting. "I come with news," she said, holding her hands out. He nodded. "They're circling," she said, "looking for Taza. They'll burn everything to get to him. And the baby." The elder squinted. "You speak for him?" "I do." "Why?" Caroline blinked. "Because he speaks for me." The man didn't smile, but his eyes softened. Another stepped forward. "Why not let them take him? Easier." She met his stare. "I buried a child once. I won't do it again." That was enough. By sundown, she returned home. Taza was waiting by the porch, Maiko cradled in his arms, a blanket wrapped tight around the baby's chest. He said nothing when she dismounted, just watched her walk toward them, her face streaked with sweat and dust. "They'll help," she said, "if it comes to it. If they come for us." Taza nodded. "I knew you would not run. I thought about it," she said, smiling sadly. "I still might." But they both knew she wouldn't. 2 days passed. The calm before the storm. Caroline cleaned the house like she was preparing for guests. She patched curtains, washed blankets, even pulled out the good china her mother left her. Taza sharpened every blade on the property. Kitchen knives, a sickle, the rusted hatchet behind the shed. He taught her how to snare rabbits, how to listen for breath in the stillness, how to shoot without flinching. At night, they laid Maiko between them on a blanket by the fire. Caroline would hum low hymns, and Taza would tell stories in Apache, stories of gods and warriors, of mountains that could speak and rivers that could remember. She didn't understand the words, but the rhythm lulled her. Then, the night before her summons expired, she heard horses again. This time they didn't knock. They came through the fence. Torches lit the sky. 5 soldiers. Wilkes at the front. Caroline ran outside with the rifle in her hands. Wilkes raised a hand. "Evening, Mrs. Webb. Get off my land." He smirked. "Didn't get your answer. Figured we'd come ask in person." The other men spread out. One moved toward the barn, another toward the coop. "I told you," Caroline said. "There's no one here but me." Wilkes dismounted. "I think we both know that's not true." She aimed the rifle. "Try me." Then came the cry, from inside. "Maiko." Wilkes smiled like he'd already won. "Go get him," he told one of the men. But before the soldier could reach the porch, Taza stepped into the doorway, baby in one arm, a hatchet in the other. The soldiers froze. The air turned thick with silence. Wilkes blinked. "Well, there he is." Taza didn't speak. He just stared at them, unmoving. "You're under arrest," Wilkes said, stepping forward. "Put the child down and come quietly." "No," Taza said. "I wasn't asking." "Neither am I." Wilkes nodded, and 2 men raised their rifles. But before a shot could be fired, Caroline stepped between them. "He's not a fugitive. He's a father. He's a savage. He's a better man than any of you." Wilkes took a deep breath. "You think you can stop what's coming? I don't have to stop it," she said. "I just have to slow you down long enough for the mountain to rise behind me." The soldiers laughed, until the arrows fell. Not many, just a few well-placed. One sliced through the torch in the hand of the man at the barn. Another hit the ground inches from Wilkes' boot. The soldiers froze. The sound of hooves echoed from the ridge. Apache warriors, dozens, standing tall under the stars, weapons drawn. Caroline turned to Wilkes. "You want to burn me down?" she said, voice shaking. "Then you'll do it while my blood burns hotter than your fire." Wilkes' eyes darted between her, Taza, and the shadowy ridge. Then, finally, he said, "Fall back." The men hesitated. "I said fall back." They retreated, one by one, torches dying in the wind. Wilkes lingered the longest. "You've made your choice," he said. "No," Caroline replied. "I found it." He mounted his horse and vanished into the dark. The Apaches didn't descend. They didn't need to. Their message had been sent. Caroline stood in the dirt, shaking. Taza came to her. Miko nestled against his chest. His free hand reached for hers. For a long time they said nothing. And then, softly, Caroline whispered, "He'll come back." Taza nodded. "Then so will we." She looked down at Miko, who blinked up at her with eyes too wise for his age. "We're not just surviving anymore," she said. Taza smiled, a real one this time. "We live now." And though the night was still full of shadows, Caroline knew that whatever came next, gunfire, gossip, or war, she would face it standing. Not alone, not afraid, but as a mother. By the time the first frost came, Caroline knew the world would never be the same again. The leaves had turned brittle and brown, dropping like ash from the cottonwood trees. Each morning, a pale layer of frost rimmed the fence posts and curled under the eaves of the house. The mountains in the distance were already wearing their winter crowns, and the birds had gone south, smarter than any of them. Miko was crawling now, fast and curious, always finding the one sharp thing or mud puddle in reach. He had Taza's eyes and Caroline's mouth, and when he smiled, it was like the world paused to watch. But he didn't laugh often. Even at his young age, Miko felt the tension in the air, the tight way Caroline stood at windows, the way Taza's hand never strayed far from the rifle propped by the door. The soldiers hadn't come back. Not yet, but absence didn't mean peace. Wilkes was still out there, stewing in the humiliation of retreat. Men like him didn't forgive. They circled, waited, smiled when you passed them in town, then poisoned your water at night. They had no illusions he would return, but no one knew when or how. Caroline had started riding into town once a week. Not to shop, just to listen. Gossip was the lifeblood of frontier towns, carried on whispers through the general store, the saloon, and the church pews. She didn't speak much, just watched. There were rumors about her. They called her the Apache's wife. Wilkes had made sure of that. Some said she'd been taken by the tribe years ago, that Miko was Taza's son and hers only by force. Others said she'd turned savage herself, that she'd burned her own barn just to cover for him. Caroline didn't correct them, let them wonder. Fear was a better shield than kindness in a place like this. But not everyone avoided her. One day, as she mounted her mule outside the trading post, a woman stepped in her path. Red hair under a faded bonnet, thin but sharp-eyed. "Your baby," she said quietly. "He smile at you?" Caroline blinked. "Sometimes." "Good," the woman said. "Then he ain't broken." Before Caroline could reply, the woman pressed a small bundle into her hands. Knitted socks, the kind with blue trim. "My grandson wore 'em once," the woman said. "You keep him warm now." Then she was gone. Caroline sat there a moment, holding the little bundle against her chest. The kindness hit harder than any insult ever could. That night she told Taza. He listened, nodding slowly. Then he said something she hadn't heard before. "You gave me life." Caroline smiled. "You say that like I dug you out of the ground." "You did," he said. "And you gave him one too." But she shook her head. No, I just opened the door. You walked through it. Taza was silent for a long moment. Then he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't the first time, but this time she didn't pull away. The winter deepened. With it came quiet days and long nights. Caroline found herself reading Myco stories by firelight. Taza carved toys from pine and whittled shapes in silence. Sometimes they didn't speak for hours, but the quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It was peace. But peace always has a price. Came in the form of hoofbeats. Late one night, when the moon was nothing more than a sliver, the sound rolled over the hills like thunder. Fast. Many. Coming hard. Taza was already on his feet, rifle loaded. Caroline grabbed Myco and pressed him against her chest, heart hammering. The porch groaned under booted feet. Then a knock. Calm. Measured. Taza moved toward the door, Caroline behind him. A voice called out. Caroline Webb? It wasn't Wilkes. She opened the door slowly, peering past Taza's shoulder. A man stood there in a long wool coat, silver badge on his chest. U.S. Marshal. I'm not here to arrest anyone, he said. I came to talk. Taza didn't lower the gun. I'm Marshal Brent Avery, the man said. And I think we both have a problem named Wilkes. They let him in. He didn't take off his coat, just stood near the fire, hands open, watching them both. I heard what happened, he said. You made quite an impression. I'm sure the stories get better with each telling, Caroline said. I'm not here for gossip. I'm here because Wilkes is recruiting. Caroline's stomach turned. Recruiting for what? Mercenaries. Men who'll ride without asking questions. He's raising a posse off the books. Claims he's hunting renegades. But from what I hear, he's gunning for your doorstep. Taza's jaw tightened. When? Soon. Caroline rocked Myco, who stirred against her chest. Why are you telling us? She asked. Marshal Avery hesitated. Because once, he said slowly, my sister hid a runaway slave in her attic. The men came with torches. She stood her ground. And they burned her house down anyway. He looked at Caroline. You don't owe the law anything, but I owe her. So I'm here to say, run if you can. Caroline shook her head. We're done running. Avery nodded. Didn't think you would. So here. He reached into his coat and pulled out a rolled piece of paper. An official pardon signed and sealed. For him, Caroline asked, glancing at Taza. For both of you, the marshal said. It won't stop bullets, but it might stop judges. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. One more thing, he said. Wilkes ain't just angry. He's scared. That makes him stupid. Don't underestimate that. Then he was gone. They spent the next 2 days preparing. Caroline gathered supplies, filled every jar, and wrapped Myco in layers of wool and blankets. Taza rode out to the canyon, where the wind carved whispers in stone, and returned with 2 men on horseback. Apache warriors. Not many, but enough. They dug trenches, sharpened stakes, cleared lines of sight. Every tree became a sentry post, every shadow a warning. The air was full of waiting. Caroline barely slept. She nursed Myco with one hand, kept the rifle by her side with the other. Taza patrolled every hour, silent and still, and the 2 warriors camped by the edge of the woods, listening to the wind. Then, just before dawn on the 3rd day, they came. No warning, no torches, just hoofbeats, muffled by snow, until they were nearly upon them. Caroline saw them first 10, maybe 12 men, all armed. Wilkes at the front, his face pale and tight. He didn't shout this time. He just pointed. Burn the house. The men fanned out. But before they reached the fence, a voice cut through the cold. You step 1 foot closer, Caroline said, stepping out with the rifle raised. And you'll answer to me. Wilkes laughed. You planning to shoot all of us? No, she said. Just you. He smirked. I'm flattered. But then, another voice joined hers. You'll have to shoot through me first. Taza. He stepped beside her, axe in one hand, a blade in the other. And from the woods behind them came the sound of a war cry, the Apache warriors emerging from the trees like ghosts. Wilkes froze. "We're done here," Caroline said. "Go home." One of the men stepped back. Another lowered his gun. Wilkes cursed and turned to them. "Cowards!" But they didn't move. Then one of them, the youngest, turned his horse and fled. The others followed. All but Wilkes. He stood there, seething. "You don't win," he snarled. "No," Caroline said. "But I get to live." Then Wilkes did something no one expected. He raised his gun. But he wasn't aiming at Caroline. He aimed at Maiko, who lay swaddled on the porch behind them. Time slowed. Taza lunged. A shot rang out. Then another. And Wilkes dropped. The marshal stepped out from the trees, pistol still smoking. "Thought I'd check in," he said, walking toward them. Taza knelt beside Wilkes' body, checking for breath. Nothing. Caroline ran to Maiko. Safe, untouched, crying but whole. It was over. For real this time. Avery stayed long enough to help bury the body. He left before the sun rose, leaving behind only tracks in the snow. Days passed, then weeks. No one else came. Caroline rebuilt the porch, Rhett hatched the barn, and sowed seeds when the snow melted. Taza planted wildflowers where Wilkes had fallen. And Maiko learned to walk. One evening, Caroline sat on the porch, baby in her lap, wind in her hair. "I was so scared," she whispered. Taza nodded. "Me too. But I'd do it again." "Yes." They sat in silence as the stars came out. And for the first time in a long while, peace didn't feel borrowed. Felt earned. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful tales from the Untamed West. Every view helps keep these stories alive. And if you believe love, courage, and found family are stronger than fear, leave a comment telling us where in the world are you watching from? We love seeing how far these stories ride. See you in the next one, Cowboy.